Hey, I'm Sadler Vaden, and today we're at Boulevard Recording Studios in Los Angeles, California, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to craft some great guitar tones in the studio. I started playing guitar at the age of 10. By the time I was 18, I started actually gigging professionally, and I used to play in all kinds of bars, cover bands, and I moved to Nashville when I was 25. 2 years after that, I started playing with the band I'm in now, which is Jason Isbell and the 400 unit. All the while, I just kept writing songs, putting out my solo records. Through that, I ended up starting to produce albums. So I'm always working with guitar players, and I'm playing guitar on those records myself. So I have to know how to craft a lot of different tones in the studio. So I find a great place to start when I'm in the studio is usually with a telly, and I've got a nice custom shop telly right here. I've got a VOX hand-wired AC30, and I like for my tone to be sort of cleanish, but right on the edge of breakup. I think that's a great place to start really with any song. I can play picking parts, also big power chords. So let's hear what that sounds like. So we have our great bass line tone. On the other end of the spectrum, as you've laid that down, you might want to get more experimental. Say the song has a breakdown, might have an intro or an outro. Sometimes I like to use what I call like the telephone sound, which I notch out all the bass, a lot of treble, gets really nasally and honky. It might sound bad on its own, but chances are it's going to sit really great in the mix. I think it's really important, if you can, to commit to things in the studio, whether it's effects, and also like use the knobs on your amp. You know, that's why they're there. Instead of always looking at a pedal to do some work for you, just turn the knobs on your amp. You might find a really cool tone that's going to sit right with another part, and you might get inspired by a tone that comes up with a great part for the song. Both of those tones, they really complement each other. You know, you're not going to have any problem hearing those in a mix. The telephone sound could be right up the middle or to the right. The other sound could be right up the middle or to the left. They both complement each other very well. I mean, typically I would probably use a different guitar to do the rhythm part and use the telly to do the interesting tone part. So now I'm going to grab a different guitar and show you what that would sound like. I'm going to play a similar part on the Gibson Les Paul with the same tone on the amp. So when I'm looking for the right tone in the studio, I tend to think if I'm going to do a picking arpeggiated part, likely going to do it on a Telecaster, and I happen to have a VOX here today. So that's a great pair to do anything that's going to have a melody line that's arpeggiated. You know, if we're doing a rock thing, if I want something bigger sounding, maybe warm sounding, I'm definitely going to go for an SG or Les Paul with humbuckers. And I think those two things together make a very great wide stereo sound. You might sometimes find that you don't really need that many guitar tracks if you're picking the right guitars and the right tones for the song. So say a Gibson Les Paul on the left side, a Fender Telecaster doing an arpeggiated part on the right side. Maybe you have a lead line up the middle. That's going to give you a big stereo image if you want that, and they're going to complement each other very well. Now, in addition to pedals and EQ on the amp, you've got all these things on your guitar too. And even I forget to turn these knobs. I said, you know, I might play a picking arpeggiated part on a telly. Well, you could do that on a Les Paul. You just need to turn your knobs a little bit and get a different sound. So I like to go to the middle position, which is a combination of both pickups here. I like to turn the neck volume down to about between 8 and 9. Let's hear what that sounds like with an arpeggiated part. So that's like really nice, present and bright. I love doing that in the studio. Even if you're playing a solo, you find that go to the middle position and just work these volume knobs, you get some different tones. Neck volume all the way up. You might want to get a cool lead sound and roll your tone knob all the way off, which is what I do sometimes, and you get this kind of thing. So I would use a tone like that sometimes for slide. You could double that tone and get this really thick, almost Jimmy Page-esque, like ramble on kind of tone. I like sometimes if you've got enough bars in a song to do a guitar solo, maybe you're playing a solo on a Telecaster and it's bright and it's cutting through, and then immediate scene change to a completely different tone. That's really fun. It can also just add a lot of excitement to your song. So let's talk about how to get some solo tones. Usually I'm looking for still kind of clean, but broken up a little bit more. I want to drive the amp a little bit more. I want to turn up the amp some. Depending on what type of solo you're going for, you know, it could be a Les Paul, it could be a Strat, it could be a Telecaster. We can just start with building like a good solo tone to begin with in a rock song. Let's do that. Cutting through, it's got some nice gain. You know, I'm on the bridge pickup. Let's see what it sounds like on the neck pickup. Let's hear the middle position with the neck volume rolled off to about 8. So you can hear it's driven, it's breaking up. It's still a little bit clean, but it's cutting through in the mix. Now we can talk about adding some effects. Personally, I always start with a whole lot of nothing, really. I like a very kind of dry sound when I'm soloing, but it all depends on what the song calls for, what the mood of the song is. If you've got something that's kind of dark and sad and there's a solo in there, maybe you add some reverb. If it's a kind of up-tempo like rock song and maybe it's a little bluesy, maybe you don't need so many effects. Maybe you just plug into an amp and crank it up and go for it. But if I'm going to use effects, usually I'll start with maybe some reverb, maybe some delay. I'll show you kind of a long delay that's really tucked back on the tone to where it's not really up front, but you're still getting the notes. I like when delay is sort of swimming around the back. It just gives it a nice space. So let's check that out. Yeah, that's a good place I would start. Also, I love slapback delay. So Let's hear what that sounds like. This El Capistan by Strymon sounds great too. Maybe it's not a solo, maybe it's just a lead part. Use some slapback, gives it this nice, almost doubled sound. So when you have delay on your tone, sometimes it can affect the way you play. And if I have like a real long delay and it's swimming around in the back, it might make me play the solo with a little more space rather than fitting a bunch of notes in there, kind of letting the repeats be heard. Example. That way, if you're stuffing a lot of notes in there, it's just going to get kind of muddy. With slapback, usually it makes me play a little more muted. So I'll do something like a fast run. I like for my slapback to almost sound like a small room. I like it like really tight. Aside from starting with a little bit of long delay or slapback delay, I might, depending on the mood of the song, just throw some verb on, and to give it a little space. Say it's kind of a dark, moody song, I might just throw a lot of verb on there. You might want to throw your delay and reverb through an effects loop. This amp has an effects loop. I don't really typically use effects loops. I learned just plug your guitar into the pedals and pedals go right into the amp. Sometimes it gets in the way of your tone, so you have to work with a mix on, say, like your delay or reverb, things like that. But I kind of prefer sometimes when it gets a little crunchy, if the reverb or delay is kind of getting in the way a little bit. Sometimes harmonically it's pretty interesting and satisfying to my ears. So let's talk about riffs. You know, let's think about Jimmy Page. A lot of the time he's doing sort of a single note, a lot of bending strings, you know, throw a chord in there to end the riff up. Pete Townsend, on the other hand, almost is just straight power chords because he had John Entwistle and Keith Moon in his band. So couldn't really play a lot of single note stuff. They were doing a lot over there as a rhythm section. So it forced him to play more chordal riffs. So back to Jimmy Page. Page would probably play something, you know, when you think of a chordal riff, think Substitute by The Who. I'll play a little something like Substitute. So both really valid approaches to creating riffs for your songs. So when you're thinking about, maybe you're playing a single note riff like the one I just played, that's Jimmy Page-esque. I didn't touch the amp. A lot of that tone is just coming from my right hand and pick attack. So, you know, if you're playing softer versus when you really dig in. So same position of pickup, not touching the amp, same pick, same everything. Let's hear the chords. That's all on my right hand, just backing off a little more for the chordal riff. You get something nice and clean. For the single note riff, you dig in a little more, it gets nice and dirty. So that's something to take into consideration when you're building your sound. Now for a more modern take on the same single note riff, if I laid that riff down with that tone, maybe you turn like an octave pedal on and it sounds something like this. That could be a really nice layer to go against the same riff with this tone. The notes will still cut through, but then you have that fuzz octave coming in there and it really gives a big beefy sound. And nowadays we have so many things at our fingertips. There's so many pedals, there's so many amps, so many different types of guitars. I think it's just really important to think about what you have and how to use the things that you have to make great tones. And you can, think about all the knobs on your guitar, the pickups, the amp. You can use one amp and use 4 different guitars and get loads of different sounds. Try to think of what the final mix is going to sound like. Also, most importantly, it's just have fun and explore. Go to your local guitar center and just plug different guitars into different amps. Doesn't matter what the price tag is. Try different pedals. Ask somebody to help you. If you got a sound in your mind, you don't know what to do about it, somebody will help you out. And just important to remember to have fun and experiment.